Hi, I'm Pedro da Costa. Welcome to Peterson Perspectives. Donald Trump has been elected president. What will this mean for the Federal Reserve, for the broader economy, and for the relationship between the Fed chair and the President of the United States? To discuss that, we have Joseph Gagnon. He's a senior fellow here at the Institute and a former Federal Reserve economist. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here.
And so let's start with the fact that Donald Trump has taken both sides of monetary policy during the campaign, and I wanted to ask you which Donald Trump you think will be the president. He's criticized Janet Yellen for keeping interest rates low, accusing her of favoring the Obama administration, and he's also warned that the stock market bubble was about to pop because of excessively loose monetary policy. So which way do you think, he has a lot of power to reshape the institution, which way do you think he will push it?
Difficult question to answer, but really interesting because he said he likes low interest rates, and he wasn't happy that the Fed was keeping rates low to help Obama, but on the other hand, clearly that implies he might like them to keep rates low to help him. But on the other hand, all the Republicans in Congress who care about monetary policy and who are in his party have wanted a tight money kind of Fed chairman, and the number one,
Paul Ryan, right?
Paul Ryan, yeah, but many of them, and they've had even bills that would sort of push the Fed in that direction. And so it's really going to be interesting how this plays out, because Trump might have instincts towards easy money, but all his fellow Republicans that care about this, as well as many of the people that he's talking about for high positions, feel the other way. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting dynamic to watch. So this legislation, this Audit the Fed legislation, it started, of course, as the End the Fed movement with Ron Paul, and it was diluted into auditing the Fed, which many Federal Reserve officials and most mainstream economists think could be extremely intrusive to the conduct of monetary policy. Do you think this legislation will have legs now that the President also has control of the House and the Senate? And what kind of impact could that have on monetary policy, if any?
Well, so I've always thought that the legislation that's been proposed so far, at least what I'm aware of, which Audit the Fed bills and the bills that are trying to get more of a rule-type behavior, are not nearly as bad when you read them as they sound at first. And I'm less worried about that. But that's just the beginning. Who knows what other legislation might be proposed, and all bets are off in terms of how bad that could be. But I think that up until now, frankly, the Fed has been, I think, exaggerating the damage of what has been proposed so far.
Because it wouldn't actually cause them to have immediate reactions to monetary policy, but simply force them to have some kind of reporting mechanism, yes, which already kind of exists. Basically.
Yeah, it doesn't say you have to follow any specific rule. It says, first of all, you could choose the rule, and second of all, if you don't follow it, you can always explain why. So it's not, so it's just a sort of mechanism to communicate what you're doing. I think it's not so bad. And the Audit the Fed thing, well, GAO can give their view on Fed monetary policy. Well, fine, many people can have their view on monetary policy. Yeah. I don't think that's such a big deal.
Okay. So as far as the appointments, I don't want to get into speculation. It is too early to know, who he might appoint. But he has the power to do a lot because there are 2 open seats. There's the potential appointment of a vice chair for regulation, and of course, he's vowed not to renew Janet Yellen's term when it ends at the end of next year. Is that right? And so, do you think at least that part he will follow through on? Can we safely expect that Janet Yellen's term will end at the end of next year?
Technically January, I think, 2018, but
right.
Anyway. I imagine he wouldn't reappoint her because she's known to be a Democratic appointee. But he might. I mean, it's not impossible. If he likes low rates and she keeps rates low, maybe he will. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. The interesting thing is that he gets to appoint a chairman and vice chairman. I'm not sure when Fisher's vice chair term comes up. It might be a little bit later than that. And then he has 2 vacancies already, and then if he appoints someone else to the vice chair for financial regulation, people are saying that Dan Trullo, who's been sort of doing that job, might leave. So you're talking about 5 appointments he could have, including the most important ones.
So it's pretty much
within the first 2 years, year and a half or so, maybe.
So it's a reshaping of the institution.
So it's a fairly quick reshaping, yeah. But even 5 is not a majority of the FOMC, which is 12 votes.
Now, sticking to the regulatory issue, because of course he's made that a kind of priority number one, he's vowed to roll back Dodd-Frank completely. What does this mean for a Federal Reserve that kind of has staked its credibility almost on the implementation of this legislation, right? These guys were involved in the development of the laws, and so now but of course they have to follow the presidential mandate. It puts them in a tough spot, doesn't it?
I wonder when they say repeal entirely or rework or something, but it's certainly a headache for the Fed. Yeah, and quite frankly, it seems odd for someone who has complained about insider influence in Washington and Wall Street to then want to do something that would seem to actually go against what he said about the influence of Wall Street in Washington.
Well, in that regard, he's also flip-flopped on what's been reported that he reached out to Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, to become Treasury Secretary. So that would be the ultimate, the ultimate move away from the promises that he seems to have made to Main Street. Now, I just want to.
Although interestingly, Dimon was associated with Obama and is considered to be a Democrat, so it's sort of interesting.
Well, apparently Dimon doesn't want the job, so it might be a moot point. Yeah. We might end up with Jeb Hensarling as Treasury Secretary. He's also in the running. Lastly, Joe, to get more concrete about the outlook, do you still think they're going to hike rates in December, and what's the outlook for next year?
Oh, I think they're going to hike rates in December. I don't think we'll have any data that would, unless data come through, but that wouldn't be because of the election.
Yeah.
So unless data happen, that would cause them to change their mind, which would be unlikely, but could happen. But in terms of the election results, I think if anything, we're looking at probably more tax cuts and spending, perhaps infrastructure spending, which would increase the deficit, and that would tend to boost the economy, which would probably cause the Fed to be even more likely to raise rates, although not in a huge rush, but I think it makes, if anything, rate rises somewhat more likely.
Okay. Thank you so much.